Welcome, welcome to the second program and gathering of the Social Justice Advisory Board for this year 5782. L'takeno lamba malchut shaddai. Tikkun olam, translated as to mend or to repair the world. That's tall order. I don't think we need to repair it all. Let's focus on what's local. Let's educate ourselves, which will hopefully empower us to become good agents for change. Melissa Bernstein is going to introduce tonight's speaker, Josephine McMillan.
Great. Good evening, everyone. It gives me such great pleasure to introduce Josephine McNeil to you tonight. Josephine is a real mover and shaker here in Newton. She's a longtime resident, and she's a dear friend to me and a mentor. Josephine has been working tirelessly on affordable housing here in Newton for many, many years. And among the many things she does, she is the founder and one of the co-chairs of UCAN, and that stands for United Citizens for Housing Affordability in Newton. It's a nonprofit organization. I've seen Josephine inspire so many people to work towards bringing affordable housing here to our hometown of Newton, to make it a place for everyone, so that everyone can afford to live here. It's a tall order and we all have a lot of work to do, but I'm so pleased to welcome her here tonight.
Thank you, Melissa, for that very kind introduction. And it's always for me, as a person of faith, to be able to speak to a community of faith. So I appreciate being here. So I have to confess, for those of you who are watching on Zoom, I did not really, Melissa said, some people would be on Zoom, but it looks like it's more of a Zoom occasion than it is an in-person occasion. So you will have to bear with me. I've been on Zoom, but I don't think I've ever been the person who is sort of featured as the speaker, but I will do my best. I think I want to, hopefully this will evolve into a conversation, because I don't think that one can really address housing without it being a conversation. Because ultimately, housing is about people. And for me, it is especially about families, because I really care about children. So I want to start with just some factual information which you might find of interest. And it's mostly drawn from a report done by a national organization called the National Low-Income Housing Coalition. And it is an advocacy organization that advocates on the national level for national policies and funding for housing for people at the lowest end of the income stream. In my years here in Newton, I think we probably started off as an organization and focusing on people whose incomes were, say, up to 80% of the area median income. But over the years, the people we were serving, and primarily families, were those whose incomes were at the lowest end of the income stream. And as Newton has become more and more expensive, the opportunities for housing for people at the lower end of the income stream at this point is almost as a possibility, especially for families. So this organization annually puts out a report which is called Out of Reach. And what they do is they look at the minimum wage in a particular location, and they do it by state, and they get in some instances down to the city level. And they look at the minimum wage, and then they look at the fair market rent And they come up with various statistics. And one of them is how many hours it would take for somebody to work, to earn enough money so that they're only paying 30% of their income for rent, which is from the government's point of view, that is the optimum that people should be paying for rent. So if one lives in Massachusetts, one would have to work 87 hours in order to earn enough money to be able to afford a one-bedroom unit, paying 30% of their income for rent plus utilities. In Massachusetts, a minimum wage worker earns approximately $702 per month. And if they were to spend 30%, I should say 30% of their area median income is $810 a month. So if you have to spend $702 a month for rent, and you only make $810 a month, question is, what do? How do you take care of your family for the rest of the month? The numbers that I'm using come from HUD, which is the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development. And they have their own calculations, which don't, they don't go directly from one to one. It's a complicated schedule, but HUD comes up with a median income based upon a median or rent based on one's median income. So Newton belongs to what's called the Boston, Cambridge, Quincy metropolitan area. And HUD determines rents by the metropolitan area. So in Newton, a two-bedroom, I'm sorry, not Newton, in that area, a two-bedroom apartment, one would need to earn $44.92 per hour, and their rent would be $2,336. Now, I don't know how many of you have been engaged in any of the conversation around housing in Newton, but with some of the new developments that have been built, one of the things I keep hearing people say is that's not affordable. And for some people, it's not affordable, but it is what the rents are. And in many instances, they're more than that. So this is where I want to do a little conversation. I don't know how we can do this with this group. But how much do you think it would cost, or how much would someone need to earn in Newton to afford a two-bedroom unit for an hourly wage? What would you get? Now just remember, I just told you in the Boston, Cambridge, the whole region is $44.92. I'm sure everybody knows has some idea what it costs to live in Newton. So what do you think? Am I sure? And you get an hourly wage.
Hourly wage.
Nobody wants to guess. That's
80.
That's a little high. All right, let me take the least expensive zip code is 02458. And that's
Newton Corner.
$52.31. The most expensive is 02468. And that's $67.31. So think about the wages, think about the jobs, think about who couldn't afford to live in Newton and pay only 30% of their income for rent. Probably leaves a lot, maybe some of the people on Zoom, and maybe some of the people in this room. If you had to move into Newton today, would they be able to do that? So when I say my concern is families, my concern is for families who make much less than the rates that I'm speaking of. And if you think of some of the jobs that might be available or needed in the community, for instance, how much do you think a person who is, say, in the moving business might earn an hour? How about people who clean offices? How about people who work in our nursing homes and who come into some of our homes to take care of our elderly people? So the question is, one of the things I was supposed to talk about was how to make, what the role of affordable housing plays in the community. So if none of those people can afford to live in the community, what does that say really about the quality of life for all of us? People use a word which drives me crazy. I shared this with Melissa earlier. And people keep talking about Newton being vibrant. What does vibrant mean? Does anybody here tell me what is, real serious? Can somebody tell me what does vibrant mean in the context of the community? Nobody? Me,
I mean, to me, vibrant means that there's a lot of kind of action going on. There's cultural things going on. Melissa provides a lot of that. There's, there's a lot of, educational things, arts. There's just a lot to do if you want to take advantage of it, basically.
And so you mentioned art, you mentioned cultural things. Where, given the people we're talking about, extremely low-income people, those we're talking about, where do those people fit into the community? And maybe more importantly, how do we make them feel that they are a part of the community?
To me, vibrant community is a colorful community. Where different people are represented. So it's not all one look, one type. To me, vibrant is younger people. My children can't afford to live in Newton. It means people of all ages and people of all colors. To me, that's what vibrant is.
Right.
And that everybody has a voice.
I like that part, that everybody has a voice. Because I think it's one of my critiques of Newton as a community is that everybody does not have a voice. Some people are seen, but not seen. Many people are not given an opportunity to be heard. I think, for me, that means that that's a responsibility that we all have. I think in the piece that came out that described what I was going to talk about, it actually said conversation, which is why I thought it was really going to be conversation. But anyway, what it says is a conversation about how we can create more affordable housing options in Newton and the role of affordable housing plays in making the city more welcoming and vibrant. So you just talked about the variety of the people, and that would make it, for you, that makes it more vibrant. But I guess I want to push back a little bit on the idea of housing making the community welcoming. Housing is not going to make anybody welcome. What's going to make people welcome is to have sufficient housing and having housing at a price point that all the people who you mentioned can be a part of the community. But then, because in Newton, the number of people who are at the lower end is significantly less than the rest of the community. So it puts the burden upon us as individuals, and again, back to being community of faith, that's part of what we are called to do, to be more welcoming, to welcome our neighbors to our space. Now, when we talk about creating this housing that allows everybody to come in, there is no way that can happen other than with public subsidies. There seems to be in Newton a feeling that private developers can come in and somehow or another they're going to create housing at a price point for people at the lowest end of the income stream. And that just isn't possible, because what has happened in this country is that housing has become a commodity. There used to be a time where a house was a place where people lived. And it would get built, but for the most part, I think, people were using their own resources to create housing. But now it's a commodity, and it's built by developers who get the resources to build it from investors. So there's a profit motive that's involved in it. It's not about charity. And so I think it behooves all of us to be willing to pay the price, meaning taxes, in order to have the resources, in order to provide housing for people at the lower end of the income stream. And we are in an environment now at the national level with the attempt to increase the amount of funding that goes into housing through Mr. Biden's Build Back Better plan. And when the bill was first put forth, there were funds that were to go into housing that would have really made an extreme difference in the ability for low-income people to be able to afford housing. There is such a shortage of housing throughout this country, and especially in this area. I think the statistic is like for every 10 units of housing that are needed, 4 are being built. Which, you think of those numbers, is just, how do you ever get to the point where there's going to be enough housing? And then even when the housing is built, people will need rental subsidies. in order to afford the kind of rents that we're talking about. So there are no easy answers, and I don't have easy answers to offer. And if this, housing, as I said, for me, it focuses on the children. If children don't have a decent home, or if their parents are constantly worrying whether or not they're going to be able to afford the rent, then that impacts the quality of life for those children. And you think about the things that those children don't have. And then you think about a community like Newton, which is wonderful. We have, schools are great. People don't have to worry about their safety. But at the same time, if we are not making those extra steps to make them feel included, then there's still a certain deficit in terms of their growing up because they don't feel that they belong. I will never forget that once I had a mom who told me, because she was living in a rental unit, and all of her daughter's classmates lived in their own home, single family home, that her daughter was ashamed to invite her friends to her home. Which again takes us back to how we as individuals have to act in such a way that if that were your child's friend, that you make that child feel at home. You make that mom feel at home. One of the things I often say to people, as a person of color, how many people who look like me have you ever invited into your home to have a meal? And if we don't do something as basic as that, then we really are not accepting people. Sharing a meal is the most common way in which we can be friends. So I don't have a lot more to say, but again, this is going to be a conversation. So, sir.
I had a question on something that you touched upon about, developers in Newton, and one of the topics that has been obviously there's been a lot of talk about changing the zoning here. And I'm just curious, it sounds like what you're saying is that just a change in zoning to allow more housing, that by in and of itself is not going to solve the affordable housing problem. We also need, in addition to that, or subsidies or city investment.
Yeah, right, absolutely, because the cost of land is so expensive in Newton that anybody who buys land, say that there's a single family on it, and they can add another unit, they're gonna add another unit. But again, given the law of supply and demand, what the amount that, again, that they've got to pay for that, plus the cost of building it. And again, someone's doing it because they want to make money. It still becomes too prohibitive for a person who is making less than, what did I say? Just than the reason slave allowance to be able to come in out in order to be able to afford it. So some changes around zoning, yes, it could help to create a small number of units, but it's not going to create tens of hundreds of units. The numbers don't work.
Yeah, my concern is even if you did have some increased units with that, it seems every time you see a single family that has been converted to a 2 or 3 family, as you said, it's like $1.5 million, right? So seems we need both the units and the subsidy as well.
Exactly.
I have a question, Josephine. So I think what I heard you say also is there's a difference between the affordable housing that's partially being built here, because quote unquote affordable housing is less than market rate, but still way above price point for a lot of families. And if that's the case, then is the route to really try to get more state and federally funded public housing in Newton, which would be tied to income? And if that's the way to go, how do we do that within Newton? Because I would assume that's something that's decided at a higher level than here.
Okay, I wouldn't necessarily say public housing. Okay. I think I would prefer the term subsidized housing, which means there's been some public funds put into it. And the way we do it in Newton, and the way Can Do did it in Newton for the most part, because most of the housing that we did was sort of a small part. But we use federal money, which the city of Newton is an entitled community for community development block grant funds and another housing program called the Home. And also for the Community Preservation Act funding. So those are the primary ways in which Newton Can Do is able to purchase properties and then to renovate them, or in some instances build new units. But that got the housing built. For the most part, people still were not able to pay enough rent if they were at extremely low level income level to manage and to maintenance, tax bill, real estate taxes, and just the wear and tear that happens to a building. So many of our tenants have this called a Section 8 voucher, which is a program whereby the federal government will pay the difference between the 30% that people should be paying and the market rent that's established by us. So it's a combination. We need to build it, then we need to provide subsidies to people so that they can pay enough rent so that the properties can be built.
I'm just wondering, Caitlin, if you can help us, we can open up for questions for everyone on Zoom, since we have so many people on Zoom. How would we do that, Caitlin?
They just need to unmute.
Just unmute and ask your question. Sure, thank you.
Or they can raise their hand and I'll unmute them.
I guess I'll ask a question while we're waiting. I'm wondering if there's something that we as a community of faith together here at Temple Emmanuel can do as a group, even if it's just to have an email list that we have ready to go if there's a vote, if there are any local politicians that we need to encourage to vote one way or the other. Is there anything that you can think of, Josephine, that as a large community of faith, we could help for people who feel strongly about this, we could help with?
One of the things, initiatives that UCAN is working on, as in response to the question that was just asked, I mentioned the fact that Can Do use funds from the Community Preservation Act to help us to create housing. And UCAN is going to be proposing some changes in the allocation of Community Preservation Act funds so that a greater percentage than currently goes for affordable housing or under the Community Preservation Act for community housing. And so once we do that, we'll have a campaign And it would be important and great if the temple and others would join in encouraging the city council to increase the amount of funds that go into affordable housing.
I had, oh, sorry. I don't know if I can talk from Zoom. Is that okay? I couldn't quite catch what you were saying about some of the ways that we can politically try to change the tenor of the debate, or what sorts of things do need. Somebody else asked the question, I think maybe Melissa, about what things need to be done. I think one of the things that my husband and I are always talking about is that if we had to move to Newton today, there'd be absolutely no way. I have friends whose children just got married. They're looking for homes. Absolutely no way they could move to Newton. But the issue we're talking about is even far beyond that. So I think the difficulty is that you're all wearing masks, so it's a little hard to catch everything, but I would like it if you could repeat what kinds of political action you think would be most helpful. And I know you were just talking about that, but maybe it's something that we as a group can discuss later. It's just a little bit hard on Zoom to catch it.
Yeah, and I'm sorry about the mask. It's, I can't.
No, you're not an option.
Okay. Well, I will repeat what I said. UCAN, of which I am one of the co-chairs, which is an advocacy organization that's been in the city for about 20 years now. We were one of the organizations that organized to pass the Community Certification Act so that we could have some funding for housing. And in all fairness, the city has been responsive with respect to the amount of funding that has gone into housing, but I think we as an organization think we are in a state of crisis, and that given that state of crisis, that the city needs to make a commitment to put more of its funds into housing, and housing targeted at families whose incomes are below 50% of the area median income, and really focusing on people whose incomes are like 30% of the area median income, because that's where the real need is in Newton and across the country. So what I was responding to Melissa is that we will be presenting some recommended language to increase the amount of money that the city is currently awarding for housing. And again, especially for people at the lower end of the income stream. And we will be conducting a campaign, and that we would love it if the temple and people throughout the city actually would find that something compelling and something that we should do.
I have a question.
I think there's a question from Gail Silberstein. Gail?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes.
I have a question about the subsidies. I didn't quite catch everything, but from what I gather from your explanation is the subsidy would cover the differential between what 30% of the income would be up to whatever the rental amount would be, whether it's, quote, affordable housing or any unit. And my question is there a cap on those subsidies? My understanding from what you said is it's a federal program. Is there not a cap? Because it seems to me that if someone were looking in Newton, the number would be some number, X. And if they were looking in a different community, it might be half of X. So is there a cap on the subsidy that can be covered by this federal program?
rather than call it the subsidy, because a subsidy could be for capital expense or could be rent. It would be a Section 8 voucher is what in terms of, that's what the federal government provides. And you are right, there is a cap depending upon the community. So I frankly, I haven't rented an apartment in a while because I have retired from Kansas. But the Newton Housing Authority receives from HUD a schedule of how much rent will be paid for a 1-bedroom, a 2-bedroom, a 3-bedroom. And the renter will pay 30% of their income. And if the unit is being offered at a price that is at or lower than the rent that HUD has assigned for that unit, then the Section 8 voucher pays the difference.
So I guess that answers my question. So I guess my follow-up question is, are there adequate number of units where that Section 8 voucher would cover the differential between the 30% of the income and the rent, or are most of the units more expensive than that in Newton?
In Newton, I would say most of the units are more expensive,
Right.
expensive than that. But the benefit to a landlord, though, to having taking a Section 8 voucher is that he or she will know that they will always get their rent. The other thing is that the way the voucher program works is that it can be adjusted for the income of the renter. So for instance, if someone loses their job and they don't have any income, then the landlord would get that full amount of that monthly rent through the Section 8 voucher.
Thank you.
Quick question, sorry to butt in again. What is the wait for Section 8 housing? I know I have had friends who have tried to get into Section 8 housing in Newton and were told 5 years or more.
I don't know the current number in Newton, but it is everywhere. It is a multi-year process because there is so much need. And as I said, there are 4 units for every 10 people who need them. So the numbers, and they don't get any better. And the population in Massachusetts continues to grow, and the need for housing continues to grow because this is we're all fortunate in some instances to be living in a state where there are a lot of jobs that are being created, but although most of them are being created at the upper end of the income range.
I actually have a follow-up question. Sorry. Is the multi-year wait for a Section 8 voucher or for a Section 8 unit or both?
Well, there aren't that many Section 8 units. Most vouchers are mobile vouchers, which means that the voucher, once someone gets a voucher, they can take it anywhere. You could get a voucher in Newton and take it to, California. If you can find a rental property in California that would accept the Newton income range. So for instance, if we're in 2-bedroom in Newton, you could pay $2,500. Then when you take your voucher to California, you have to find a unit that was $2,500. And I think the housing prices in California are even worse than they are here.
So if the issue, I understand what you're saying. I appreciate your explanation. If the issue is that there may be fewer than optimal units that could fall within the equation of the 30% plus the voucher, is there a possibility that the city could help? I don't want to use the word subsidize, give some money to the landlord to make up the difference. So you could create more, get more units on the market. So the landlord would be made whole. A portion of it would be paid by the tenant. They're up to 30%. A portion would be the Section 8 voucher, and the city would kick in some amount to allow a unit that formerly would not have worked within the Section 8 equation to become a unit that could work with Section 8.
That could be a possibility if the city could be persuaded that that's a way in which it would use its funding. But it certainly could be a possibility.
I think that your explanation about Section 8 tenants is very important. I think people have a misconception. They're scared of Section 8 tenants. I had a lot of experience with it, and I found it was the best program around, because you knew you were going to get your money. The people wanted to be there. They were very respectful of the property. And I think some re-education for landlords on that would be beneficial, and they might actually want to participate in the program precisely because of what you said.
Well, I can't see with your name, but would somebody take down that lady's name?
I know what
Somebody knows me. Somebody knows me in that group.
Okay. It's interesting that you say that, because I am a member of the city's Fair Housing Committee. And from time to time, we try to have educational programs. And we have had, not in the recently, but in the past, programs in which we have invited landlords in and tried to make them aware of the program, and for them to hear from persons such as yourself that it is a good program and one they could avail themselves of. So thank you for that.
Thank you.
Josephine, just to follow up on, oh, sorry, was someone else speaking?
That would be me.
Oh, okay, Amy, please.
I'll just add a quick question. So during the election, obviously there were the two groups, voters for Vibrant Newton and then the Right Size Newton. I was wondering whether, UChan is working with them and sort of what role you think those organizations are going to play going forward on these issues.
You can try very hard not to align itself with any particular group, because my own personal opinion is that in each group there are people who I and the group may agree with, and others and conversely. So I think the better role for us is to educate people about housing, which was the main reason the organization was formed. And we've taken a little bit of a turn in response to the urgency for housing for extremely low and very low income families. So, in some instances, we might find ourselves viewing a particular issue in such a way that we would be in support of perhaps of something that was offered by one group or the other group. But we again, try not to align ourselves politically with one group or another, because I'm not sure that that serves any particular purpose.
Hi, I wondered if I could say something. Is that okay?
Yes.
Can you hear me? Okay. I'm wondering if there is anything like a Newton Community Land Trust. I work on occasion with an organization called the Boston Neighborhood Community Land Trust. And what they are is a nonprofit that raises funds and also gets money from Boston to purchase homes that are in foreclosure and make those homes into affordable housing that is rent stabilized and is forever affordable housing and rent stabilized and managed through the land trust. I wonder if anything like that exists in Newton, or if that might be a possibility for some kind of solution.
There, nothing like that exists in Newton. And frankly, I think the opportunities for purchases of foreclosed properties in Newton is a rarity. And the cost, even for if something were to be foreclosed on, I think would not lend itself to creating a land trust. The land is just too expensive, I think. I haven't run the numbers, and I have only limited knowledge of land trust, but I don't think the Newton housing market lends itself to a community land trust just because it's so expensive.
It could be one of the things that happens sometimes in Boston is people volunteer their property. So they might put it in their will, or, and say that, after they pass, they want their home to go to the land trust. That's happened on occasion. And, it's possible that folks living in Newton might want to donate their property to a community land trust so that it can be designated for affordable housing.
It's a possibility.
Josephine, when you talked a little about the city having to invest in order to create more affordable housing, and then Gail mentioned one of the ways that could happen would be for them to make up the differential between the market rent in Newton and the Section 8 vouchers. What are the other possible ways the city could invest to effectively create more affordable housing besides that?
Well, I think that the Community Preservation Fund, which I mentioned, the Community Development Block Grant Program, I think Newton may use as much of those funds as we can by federal regulation to create housing. So other than some willingness to tax itself more, or even right now for CPA, only 1% is the surcharge. It could go up to 3% if the citizens decided that they wanted to do that. So that's another possibility.
Is the state still matching that 3%?
It is matching it to some extent. It all depends. When we first started, it was a very good match because there weren't that many communities, but more and more communities are going, have gone into it. So it has reduced it. Some people are talking about a transfer tax, which I'm not sure that the city can do that itself without permission from the state legislature, but that would be an instance where, when property is sold or purchased, there is a certain amount of tax that you have to pay, like a recording fee and so forth. And this would say that some amount of money and additional money would be used and would go back to the city, and it could be used for to create affordable housing.
So I'm curious, I'm not as educated on this whole subject, and I see a lot of it is about the city and taxes and what the city can give and what the government can give. Are there philanthropic organizations and nonprofits, maybe this is what a land trust is, but organizations that collect money for building affordable housing, as opposed to the developer, entrepreneur who needs investors? Is there sort of a nonprofit who take, work with donations and can do this building or purchasing of land? Are these organizations out there somewhere? And
Well, that's what Can Do did. Can Do was a nonprofit organization, and a fair amount of the funding that we had came from, frankly, fundraising. And in fact, it was one of the ways in which we were able to maintain the rents and the properties, because as I said, the amount of money that people could pay for rent, given the governmental limitations with respect to how much you could charge, was because we fundraised. And that was we would fundraising somewhere around $100,000 a year, which would support the maintenance of the building. We also, in about the last 5 years of my service as executive director, we began to provide supportive services for our families, which is another something we haven't talked about, but which I am convinced more and more that we need to do. The families need the housing, but they need more. They need to be able to be in a position where they can acquire skills, job training skills, learn financial management, and other services so that they can improve their financial situation, so that they become economically self-sufficient. And the ultimate goal is that they would be in a position where they would no longer need to live in housing that was subsidized or have need for such a voucher. So that is a long-range goal. It's not something that happens overnight, but if we, as a society, frankly, would make the determination, yes, we want to provide people with housing, but we also want to enable them to be in a better economic situation so that they can move out of the housing and make room for somebody else to move in, because we will never have enough housing. So we have to move the needle and make people more, and make people in a better position to be able to become sufficient.
So just to follow up on that, is that a good role for a faith community, people to be helping with organizations, donating to organizations like that, and volunteering time? Are there volunteering opportunities, things that we in this community can be doing to help, sort of in a practical way?
Yeah, that would be, yes, absolutely. And that's about, again, the welcoming and the inclusivity. One of the very first projects that we did, Can Do, was we purchased an old Victorian home and we converted it into 5 two-bedroom units. And the families who went into it were from a program that used to be run by what was called Newton Community Service Center, which is now known as Family Access, and they no longer have this program. was a program for young parents. And these were for young women who were single moms, many who would have been homeless, but many who were still living at home, but were not living in very healthy situations. And so the mom and the child would move into the unit, and the family Newton Community Service Center would provide some services, but we also were able to identify 5 different faith communities who adopted more or less the families for a 2-year period, helped them to get settled, helped them with furnishings and so forth. Unfortunately, it never quite worked the way that I wanted it to work, because my hope was that by establishing those initial relationships, that those relationships would continue after the young women moved out because it was transitional housing. But I don't think there was one instance in which the relationship continued, but not beyond that. But I think, the point you're making is that if a faith community were to engage with the family like that, then they could, help the families. Even, I think in some ways it's more important than the financial support would be the mentorship and the relationship that could be formed, because they will probably be people in the congregation who would be able to provide certain kinds of services or support for the family. Now, helping them to write a resume, creating a network that can help them to advance.
I wonder, Josephine, when I first met you, I got confused between can do and you can. So I'm wondering if there's anyone else out there, if you could explain that these are 2 different nonprofits and what the difference is.
Okay, you can actually, it's not really a nonprofit. We are an unincorporated association of individuals who care about housing and began to educate people about the need for affordable housing. I don't think we any longer in a position where we need to educate people about the need. I think it's more about, right now, informing people about the depth of the need, that the need is there. And it's beyond, it's one of the things that concerns me is that now when we talk about affordable housing in the city, because it's become so expensive, the focus is really on housing for people who are already in the city. I think you mentioned the idea that your child can no longer afford it. Or we say that older people who might want to downsize can't afford it. And when we limit it to that, it is eliminating the opportunity for other people to move into the city, which is why I think what's happened with you, Candace, why we are focusing on the families who are at the lower end of the income thing. So that's sort of the focus of it. Whereas Can Do is a nonprofit that develops affordable housing. And the way Can Do was formed is because the city of Newton in the early 1990s, became a part of another of a federal program called the Home Program. And it is a program that provides money specifically for housing. And it can be used to build housing. It could be used for rental assistance. However, the community decides that they want to use funding. But to receive the funding, the city had to establish a nonprofit called the Community Housing Development Organization. And CAN-DO became the city's for the charter. And that was, and the way that formed is, it was from some board members who were on the board of the New Community Development Foundation, which is like the oldest affordable housing organization in the city. And I happen to be on their board. And this new program, the city had to form the nonprofit, as I said, called the CHODO. And a third of its board members had to be low-income people. And so NCDF invited 3 people, and I was one of them, who were already on their board, plus 2 residents to form the CHODO. And that was in 1994, and CAN-DO still exists. And as I think I mentioned, I'm not going to mention it tonight, but some people know that I've come out of retirement so that CAN-DO can begin again to focus on housing and services for very low.
Thank you, Josephine. That's broad. I appreciate like how that you're working on so many like frontiers, all with the same like unifying factor, but you're working on many faces and many frontiers, and I like that, and I appreciate that. I look forward to sort of figuring out how we as a community of faith can be a support, can be involved, and how we can continue to educate ourselves about the needs, of the community as you described. Anything else you want to say?
I am happy to continue the conversation, and that maybe if we will really be able to have a real conversation.
We all look forward to that. So thanks.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Josephine, so much. And thank you, everyone, for coming.
Thank you.